I'm here today in Tennessee at the Leiper's Fork Distillery.
This building is kind of like a big man cave. We're trying to recapture the lost art of small batch distilling here in Tennessee.
So these are the rick houses.
This is our rick houses. It's going to be fun for you getting to know the personality of your still.
To be honest with you, TJ, I was very naive.
I'm here today in Tennessee at the Leiper's Fork Distillery, and we're gonna learn a little bit more about what it takes to get a small distillery off the ground. One of the benefits we have here at this channel as we go on this journey of trying to create our own distillery is talking to and learning from folks that have already done it, that are further along, that have already learned, hopefully, most of the lessons we're gonna have to learn. And if you can learn lessons the easy way, I strongly suggest you do it. So we're trying to get ours off the ground. They've got a great distillery here at Leiper's Fork, and one of their bottles, a Fred Minnick pick, was actually my favorite craft whiskey from last year. And what that award is basically new things that I tried during that calendar year, not a new release of something I've already tried, but new things. And what was so interesting about that bottle is it had so much dark fruit on it, raisins, was just a really complex and interesting whiskey with a different flavor profile that I hadn't tried before. So we're gonna dig in a little more here, learn about how they're making their whiskey, and hopefully take away a few things that can help us make good whiskey in the future as well.
Our primary focus here at Leiper's Fork is to recapture the lost art of small batch whiskey production in Tennessee that was prevalent in this state going back to its before it was even a state. One reason we put our still on our label and our DSP on our bottle is we're proud of the fact that we're distillers first and foremost. And so everything we do at the distillery, we try to view through the lens of what's right for the whiskey. So a lot of times that's not doing things economy of scale, which from a business standpoint is a little bit, kind of counterintuitive. That's what the way we feel is the right thing to set things up for long-term authenticity and all the rest of it.
This is our timber frame building, our retail cabin that TJ took photo of. That's an 1820s log cabin that we actually moved here log by log back in 2015 when we started the distillery. I try to keep everything as traditional. I love the state's, Tennessee's state traditions. And so when we were building our buildings here, we wanted to be very intentional on kind of capturing that tradition of Tennessee. So old log cabin, nothing speaks, to Tennessee like old log cabin, with our retail and tasting and offices. And then this timber frame building is all pegged together. So it's a timber frame mortise and tenon building. We're a very small batch distillery here at Leiper's Fork. We started distilling in April of 2016. Actually had to change a county law here in my county. It took me from 2012 to about 2015. It took 3 years to change that law and get our building permit. But we're all family owned here. Like I said, we're very small batch. We only make about 25,000 gallons of whiskey per year.
How many barrels is
That's
that?
about 500 barrels. And we do have plans to scale. We run a 500-gallon pot still that I'll show you here in a minute. We're probably going to change that system in the next year to a 1,000-gallon system, so that'll double our capacity. But right now, that 500 barrels a year, us being family-owned and very streamlined, we can grow a successful business just making 500 barrels a year. This building is kind of like a big man cave. You go to a lot of distillery, and it's very kind of industrial looking. We try to create a homey vibe here, if that makes sense. And so I wanted to distill in a space that would be something that I want to hang out in. So we got a lot of, for every distiller we got from different states, we got their flags hanging in here. And one of the things that we're hell-bent on here is we're trying to recapture the lost art of small batch distilling here in Tennessee. And so we do that kind of in 3 ways. We do that with local quality ingredients. We also do that with time-honored techniques that I'll talk about, and then also attention to detail. So going back to one of those first things is quality ingredients. We're hell-bent on using as all local grains as we can get. We want our whiskeys to be an expression of our surroundings in Williamson County. So I say to people that we're inefficient by design here at the distillery, and that's we could do a lot of things that would help, that are more akin to economy of scale. But for us, being a small batch producer, we're trying to do things to differentiate ourselves. And we're a whiskey house here. We don't make vodka gin, we only make whiskey in keeping with the traditions of Tennessee.
What made you think you could pull this off?
To be honest with you, TJ, I was very naive. I tell people I was passionate and I had just enough money to be dangerous, and all those things. And I kind of burned my boat. So I had 2 careers before the distillery. When I first graduated from Auburn University, I was an estimator for a commercial construction company. Then I got into financial services and ran a small financial planning firm. The day I got this place approved, I sold my book of business to my 2 partners and I burned my boat. So there's no plan B for me. You know, I've got more than half my net worth, you know, wrapped up in this place, but I tell you what, and I think you would agree with this, and you're going to find this to be true. It feels good to physically make something, especially one that consumers and people can enjoy. And you know, we preach responsible consuming here, but you know, whiskey has a way of bringing people together, promoting fellowship and camaraderie. It's fun to see people come in and how much interest there is, and you see it every day. I mean, the followers you have on what you're doing is wild, and it's really a testament to the rebirth of American distilling. And so it's fun to see all that play out.
We'll come back to ginger. This is our Scottish Swan Neck pot still, built by Vendome Copper and Brass out of Louisville. You know, I've had a passion for distilling going back to when I was a younger gentleman. And I love the history behind pot stills, and I'll talk a little bit about that.
How did you get into, you said you had a passion when you were younger.
Yeah.
How did that occur?
You know, weirdly, it's always fascinated me how Scottish and Irish folks came over to the New World, crossed the Appalachian Mountains into what would become Kentucky and Tennessee, and just started distilling corn into what would become bourbon. But all those roots go back to Scotland and Ireland. My family's Scots-Irish, so that cultural heritage aspect of whiskey production really captured my imagination as a young adult. And I had an uncle that dabbled in a little bit of making his own whiskey. And so between those 2 things, it just captured my imagination in a big way. And so when Tennessee started changing some laws in 2009, I started looking at what a distillery would look like on paper. So really, this is a culmination of a passion opening this distillery that's really gone back to when I was about a 20-year-old kid.
So you started distilling at 20 years old?
Yeah, and the statute of limitations has run out on that, I hope. But yes.
I don't think the 20 years old is what gets you distilling.
No.
It's the distilling without a license that gets you.
It is, exactly right. By the time I graduated from college, the internet was obviously invented, and more literature was written on the subject of distilling. So I just devoured everything I could get my hands on the art of distilling, from an art standpoint and from a scientific standpoint. American Prohibition changed the entire landscape of American alcohol industry, and we're still really dealing with those effects really up until the last 20 years. And now you're seeing this renaissance in American distilling, Tennessee distilling, Alabama distilling. And so it's really fun to see us kind of getting back to closer to what things looked like before American Prohibition.
You've heard people say that bourbon is American history in a glass. You can almost tell the history of America through a glass of bourbon. Same thing, Tennessee whiskey. You can tell a lot of history through its beverages. And you know, bourbon is America's official native beverage. Corn is America's official native grain. So it's fun to be in an industry that not only are we manufacturing something, there's genuine interest from consumers, and they're fun to interact with.
We've got our mill house at my farm. My wife and I live on an 82-acre farm just 3 miles up the road from us. And so we have our mill house there with our silos. So all the local grains, and we actually are growing about 50% of our own corn on our own farm. So that when we bring in that grain to our mill house and silos, we actually mill everything off-site over there, pre-weighed and batched per our recipe here. That's a little bit convoluted, but the county they restricted me on my footprints of buildings here. And so because of that, it forced us to move our milling operation off-site. So
what kind of restrictions did they put on?
When I was getting going, one of the things they wanted to do is control the size. So they gave me 12,500 total square footage of footprint. Doesn't include my porches, boiler room areas, just the footprints of the building. And they also that we can make 25,000 gallons of whiskey here. That was another thing restriction they put on me. So I had to really take a step back and say, hey, given these restrictions, can I still run a successful, viable business under these parameters? And so, we built everything on paper and it all penciled out. Us being family owned and streamlined, I don't have to sell as much whiskey as a lot of other distilleries with investors and maybe institutional equity and things like that behind them to have a successful business.
So you had to stay to the law, get it started, and then show them that we're not that bad.
Right, and so now, we've been going, it'll be 9 years, 9 years this month in April, and so we put a good foot forward with the county. They see the tourism impact that we're having. We actually didn't anticipate how much tourism impact we would have or how much of a revenue stream that would be, and we were shocked. I actually didn't factor in any kind of on-site bottle sales, tourism, tour revenue, or merch revenue into our business model, because I wanted to be a traditional distribution model. I wanted to be in the whiskey industry, not the tourism industry. But what we found is that consumers are very interested in whiskey production from all different kinds of aspects. So, and we sit south of Nashville about 45 minutes, as you know. And so we've been able to capitalize on the tourism infrastructure that's built into Nashville, and a lot of people are coming to see us. And we were hoping to see 10,000 visitors in year 3 of opening. We more than hit that in year 1, and we see close to about 20 to 25,000 visitors per year. That's a lot of gravy for us, and it helps tell our brand story and all the rest of it. We bring in all of our grain pre-milled and batched per our recipe. We run a 1,000-gallon system here. We are running a 500-gallon still, but we run the still twice a day. So when we upgrade to a 1,000-gallon still, we'll keep all the rest of the equipment the same. We'll just run that still once a day instead of twice a day. And it'll give us, we'll probably extend production into the weekends. Right now we don't run Saturday or Sunday. Once we get the larger still, we'll probably go to a 7 days a week production schedule.
So double your output and almost 50% more time running.
And my labor costs will go down a little bit.
This grain setup over here he's got is smart, because the building we've bought, one of the problems I'm having is, where do we put the grain bins? We're limited on space as well. And I just had never considered the grain processing just being off-site and bringing it in bins like this. So this is why you go see other places, because there are a lot of people cleverer than you are. And so this has all, like, you don't bring in corn and wheat, it's a full run mixed together?
No, so we bring in, the big bins hold our corn. The smaller bins hold our wheat or rye, depending if we're on Tennessee whiskey or bourbon. And then they also hold our barley malts. I approach distilling a lot of ways in the form of cooking. Once you kind of figure something out, I love distilling because it's a perfect blend of art and science. And so once you understand the scientific principles, you can say, hey, from an art standpoint or a cooking standpoint, if I do this, I should get this desired result. So we use more grain, but we feel like for the style of whiskey we're trying to make, it's what we want to do. So like I said, this is our 1,000-gallon fermentation tank. One of the things that we do here a little differently is we use a sweet mash process. And sweet mash was more in favor before American Prohibition. And there's only a handful of us right now that I think are running sweet mash. That would be Wilderness Trail, Peerless, Hard Truth, us, and there's a handful of other ones, but those are the ones just off the top of my head right now. We're making bourbon right now, so we're a bottle and bond distillery. Whiskey in a bottle that says bottle and bond. All the whiskey in there has to be made one single distillery, same season, same year. So we run Tennessee whiskey July to December, and then we run our bourbon from January to July. So that's our season breakdown. We sprinkle in our rye production in January when we go through the rest of our rye we had on hand for our Tennessee whiskey. 1,000-gallon fermentation tanks. This is on a 2-day ferment right now, so this is a 48-hour ferment. You can see this mash is working really good. So for our bourbon, our grain bill is 70% non-GMO corn, 15% wheat, locally grown, non-GMO, and then the 15% toasted barley malt. On our Tennessee whiskey, the grain bill is a little different. 70% corn, 15% rye, locally grown rye, and 15% toasted barley malt. So the only thing we did different between our bourbon and our Tennessee whiskey is change the small grain from wheat to rye for the Tennessee whiskey. So like I said, this is on a 2-day ferment. That looks really good and clean. It's working really nicely. So this is our 500-gallon pot still. This is another inefficiency that we do. So we're a batch system here, and a lot of your folks already know this, but a batch system means that we mash a batch, ferment a batch, distill a batch, and repeat the process. I love pot stills, and the reason being is the column still was invented around the 1850 by an Irishman named Aeneas Coffey. And so when he designed that still, column still, he was actually doing it for the gin market in London. So Scottish distiller said, hey, we can run this continuous column and produce a lot of alcohol efficiently. For 600 years, all the whiskey in the world was made on a pot still. Single malt Scotch whiskey to me is a beautiful category. To me, pot distillation is very easy for me to wrap my head around from a distiller standpoint. And also pot distillation tends to drive over more character from the grains of that mash over into the whiskey. So you're getting more of a full-bodied whiskey in a pot distilled whiskey than you would in a column distilled whiskey. And trust me, I ain't knocking column distilled whiskeys. Beautiful whiskeys made all over the country in Kentucky on column stills. It's just, as a distiller, you just have to follow what you know to be true or what you feel like is the best for your brand. And so for me, between the history of pot distillation and what I feel like the resulting product is, it sets me up nicely for the whiskey we're trying to design here.
Our still, fortunately or unfortunately, will do bourbon, but it's really designed for vodka or gin or something a little higher proof that you're gonna distill the hell out of it. And so we've got to kind of figure out what it will actually do without having to fight it all the time.
And TJ, it's going to be fun for you getting to know the personality of your still. And I will tell you, to me, a still is like a boat. They get small really quickly. Build in you some extra capacity, you know what I mean, to give yourself some leeway. But one of the things that was a little bit harder for us here is because we weren't making vodka or gin, we had to find a ways to have some cash flow while we were aging our whiskey. If we had a vodka or a gin, it would have made life a lot easier for us from a cash flow perspective. We were able to survive that through tourism, and we sold white whiskey. We first started, it took me a little while to wrap my head around this, but my uncle is my CFO, and he was like, Lee, we need some cash flow. And we went and sourced about 20 barrels a year from another distillery in Tennessee. We were completely transparent about it. Say, hey, we didn't make this whiskey. We brought back an old pre-prohibition brand from Tennessee just with the express intent of getting us through the first 4 years until our own whiskey was aged. As our whiskey became available, we phased that other whiskey out. We get the question in here all the time, what's the difference between Tennessee whiskey and bourbon? And the smart-ass answer to that is the only reason Tennessee whiskey is not bourbon is because Tennesseans don't want it to be. And that's very true. So, when we fill out our federal reports every month, production reports, there is no box for Tennessee whiskey. It all goes into bourbon. So, we all know the criteria of making bourbon. That's the same criteria for Tennessee whiskey with 2 caveats. So you basically make bourbon in the state of Tennessee. Before that whiskey goes into the cask, we filter it through a layer of sugar maple charcoal. This is a sugar maple stave that we pulled out of the fire. This is a picture of us kind of doing that, kind of older picture, but that's the charcoal being made there, and that's it after it's finished. And I wasn't going to make a Tennessee whiskey when we first started the distillery. And friends in Kentucky said, I'm a contrarian by nature, and I don't want to do something because I'm expected to or because I have to do it. So they said, hey, you need to do a Tennessee whiskey. You'll be doing yourself a disservice if you don't. There's less people that can make Tennessee whiskey. You can make bourbon in all 50 states, as we all know. My philosophy is I love the traditions behind Tennessee whiskey. Just that contrarian part of me There wasn't a lot of people making Tennessee bourbon back then. When I decided to do it, I'm like, we're gonna do it right. Right now, our whiskey's going into two types of cooperage. One is a char 4 medium toast with a stave age of about 12 to 18 months. And so as we've kind of figured out, we've been operating 9 years now. You know, R&D in the industry is about 4 years to really figure out what a whiskey's gonna do. Your type of whiskey interacting with wood. So we've actually gone now to a char 3 with a heavy toast, trying to bring out more of those bread notes, doughy notes, marshmallow notes, things like that from that toasting aspect of it. Right now we're doing half in char 4 medium and half in char 3 heavy toast with a 18-month stave age. When we first started, we were using a char 4 pretty much no toast with a young stave age. And so we slowly kind of evolved into what we're doing now. We're just now going to start pulling whiskey off of wood that's char 3 with a heavy toast. So we're liking the way that profile is. So we'll probably eventually, you don't do anything knee-jerk here. You know what I mean? Like you're, as a distiller, you're a distillery, you're looking out 10 years. So for us, you know, we'll probably, seeing how this whiskey's coming off wood, we may slowly go away from char 4. We'll probably do that over time. For us, when we started distilling, we were paying about $150 for new cooperage. We pay $375 now per cooperage, per barrel. We're starting to see those prices come down now, which is a good thing. Same way you're seeing in the whiskey industry right now as a whole.
If you were starting over right now, what would you do differently?
If you asked me that question 2 years ago, I would have said it had to do with capacity and outside distribution. I would have put in a system to make at least 15 barrels a day. Now with us here, we're going to increase our capacity, but now we're finding ways to grow our brand from a tourism standpoint. We don't do a lot of crazy marketing and advertising. We like to talk to folks like you and tell our story that way. So we fly under the radar. But one of the things it's helped us do is it's helped us grow our brand kind of methodically and organically, which I feel like is helping us sustain us right now, and engaging with people that care. Like your audience, they're subscribing to you and they're watching your content because they genuinely care and are interested about whiskey. There's a lot of people that aren't like that. And so for us, it's always been important to engage with people that are interested in what we're doing here from an authenticity standpoint. There's ways we could have done it faster. I could have gone and sourced, you know, juice from another distillery and blended half of mine in with theirs to get some scale and gone to bring our price point down. I mean, you know, we're not the cheapest whiskey on the shelf. We haven't made a price increase since we released our own whiskey in 2019. And even though our cost of goods have gone up, you know, our energy costs have gone up, our cooperage costs that we talked about earlier have gone up dramatically. And so we're not the cheapest whiskey on the shelf. So we need to find people who care about the origins of things, and that's a little bit different consumer.
So these are the rick houses.
This is our rick houses. This is what we got right now. And we have a lot of these. We've got close to 4,000 barrels laid down right now. We used to contract barrel storage at another distillery south of us. So as we would make a month worth of whiskey, we would take that whiskey down to another distillery that had large warehouses, let that sit. We started bringing everything in-house. Now we've got them between our two properties and connexes. It's not the optimum situation. We're stuffing about 110 barrels into a connex. We palletize them 6 like that. In the next 2 years, we'll build our rick house where these connexes sit. I'm gonna do a traditional rick system. I like a traditional rick system because you can access every barrel. We've got to take a skid steer or forklift and pull all of these barrels out just to access that one barrel. If this was in a traditional rick house, I can go straight to that barrel walking down the alley, tap that barrel with a drill, and a bottle and some plugs and take a sample straight and not have to, it's a lot less labor.
We've been having a lot of those conversations too and thoughts. The palletized setup works really well at scale.
Yes.
If you need to pull a lot,
Yep.
right? And I don't mean a lot as in a big number, I do mean that, but like most distilleries are gonna have everything they distilled in a day in a lot. And so if you wanna pull an entire lot of whiskey, if you're doing, you know, huge blends and you need to access them quickly, but at your size, you need to access one or two,
Yes.
this becomes an inefficient way of doing
It does, especially when it comes to sampling barrels. It is a little bit of a pain in the ass, but like I said, when we build our traditional rick house here, and we've already gotten that approved through the county, which is a good thing, we'll build it like a traditional ricking system. We've already designed it on paper. I just got to fund it.
So you talked a little bit about your family's history and how that's played into, you know, the style of distillate and everything you're doing. You have your wife working here. Yeah. Like, tell me what it's like for this to be, grounded in family.
It's kind of a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing being small and family owned because we can make nimble decisions, and we're allowed to experiment a little bit. Of course, we're making our core products that we're building our brand around. And also, I don't have a lot of outside investors that are breathing down my neck. So from that standpoint, it makes life a lot easier. Some of the negatives is just access to capital. You know, we've bootstrapped everything as a family so far, still trying to build our rick house and things like that and grow the brand, which needs capital to be able to do those things. So, you know, when I say it's a blessing and a curse, that's kind of tongue in cheek, but it really is true. You know, it's great from a working environment in the way that we're autonomous on our own, but access to capital would make having outside investors more of a plus, if that makes sense. It took me 3 years to change the county law here. I could have gone to downtown Nashville or to an industrial area in Davidson County, which is Nashville, and been distilling probably 2 years before I got set up here. But going back to that heritage part of it, I wanted to make whiskey in an environment like this. I didn't want to make whiskey next to a guy making plastics, you know. So we sit out here on 30 acres amongst rolling hills and horse farms, and we're blessed to be here.
So why do you think now's a good time for us to be getting into it?
We're seeing a lot of crazy news in the industry. Layoffs, production slowdowns, things like that. So from a consumer standpoint, I think we're gonna slowly start seeing probably less brands on the market. And I don't think that's a good thing, but what it does is it makes the marketplace a little less noisy. And with your infrastructure that you've got built in with Brewzle that you've been doing for years, I feel like by the time you get fully running and having your own stuff come out, the industry will have stabilized by then. And you've got a foundation with what you've created over the last few years that's given you a really solid foundation. So I think you're setting yourself up for success. People that pick up a bottle of Leiper's Fort Distillery, I want people to know that the whiskey in that bottle was produced and created by people that care about what whiskey is, that are motivated by passion. And yes, we do things here because we want to make money, but that's not our primary driving force. You know, we're here to tell the story of whiskey and to do it right and bring back the history and heritage of Tennessee whiskey production. And the people that support us in that endeavor, we're eternal grateful for them.
Had a great time here at Leiper's Fork Distillery. Learned an awful lot about getting our own place up and off the ground. Really appreciative about the open and honest conversation and the feedback on what we're trying to do. And honestly, there's a lot to learn here. Really in love with the brand. Like I said at the start, one of my favorite craft whiskeys last year was that single barrel that we got from this place. Not our single barrel, the Fred Minnick single barrel. We do have a few single barrels coming that are gonna be close to that. We'll see when I've actually had them both side by side and are able to try them. But there's so many great craft brands out there, so many in your area, I'm sure in your neck of the woods. Be sure to let us know about those. We're always trying to find more brands that are doing it right, that really have a passion for their craft, that are making great whiskey. And there are a ton of them all over the country, really all over the world. So appreciate y'all watching all the way to the end. We'll see you in the next one.